Yes, hello and welcome to all our wonderful West Australian football fans to this week's preview edition of Around the WAFL. We're in full swing for the season. Round 2 is not too far away. 5 games on Saturday, and after round 1, if the first round was anything to go by, wait till we preview the matches for round 2. We've got some crackers in store. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts or on the BackChat YouTube channel, or you can like us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. My name is Paul Persic. It's always a great pleasure to have your company, and today I'm joined by a smooth, slick operator behind the mic. He does some great work in podcasting and in commentary for Seven's WAFL coverage, Tyson Beattie. He joins me today on Around the WAFL. TB, welcome.
Paul, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on Around the WAFL. I think we called a game a long time ago together, back in 2017 or 16 or something like that at East Fremantle Oval, way back in the back of the Merv Cowan stand. And now it's great to see you, to have your own podcast, and it's looking fantastic at the moment.
It feels like old times, doesn't it? 2017, it feels like a long time ago since we called that game over at the old stand. Of course, East Fremantle Oval getting a well overdue makeover, but it's a pleasure to have you on today, and we've got a big show coming your way. First of all, Tyson, some of the big news items leading into the season. What about the opening round? It was revealed that there was a huge crowd spike for all the 5 games over the Easter weekend. Just around 15,000 people attended those games, a 52% increase in attendance from last year, a huge boost for the competition and good for WAFL footy.
Yeah, and I believe that's the biggest aggregate crowd for a non-WA day round since round 6 2009. So that's a pretty good effort by the WAFL, and probably credit to the WA Footy Commission for the amount of marketing and promotion that they've put in. They had a big campaign going into the year. They put a lot into it, and it seemed to have stuck because those crowds were pretty good. The fixtures were great as well. The game at Leederville was sensational. The grand final rematch up at Pentanet as well. So I think a great effort by the competition, and they certainly got the reward for it.
They certainly did, and not only the fans that turned out, those that have been following WAFL for such a long time, but also new fans that were attracted to the product through the new marketing campaign. It really is a big tick in the box.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the campaign is really aimed at trying to bring people to the ground for more than just the football. It's an event. It's an opportunity to bring families, younger people to the ground. They had a great success with that grand final in terms of the festivities around the game, and I think they want to tap into that idea a little bit more and give people something in addition to great football, but also a reason to go to the ground. And I think a lot of the clubs took that up with putting on food trucks and other things that can bring people to the ground. So it's a good effort by everyone involved.
They wanted to capitalise on that grand final success at Leederville Oval last year, that day in October, and it seems as though the West Australian Football Commission really fared income about this new direction, and so far the first step has been achieved. It's just a matter of consistently achieving it and keeping those crowds in.
Yeah, and I think, every club sort of has their own little way to attract their types of supporters they want to get there. But it's also not just what you see on match day, but it's also that promotion through social media and targeting another audience that might be interested in coming to the game. So they've really been working hard on that, and hopefully we can continue to see these crowds increase.
Well, especially with a couple of big games in store, not just Swan Districts and East Fremantle, but also Claremont and South Fremantle, and then the co-tenants doing battle at Leederville Oval. Now, another big story throughout the week was the story of the centre bounce being removed for season 2023. One round in, Tyson, it seems not a lot of people have been creating a fuss about it as far as a negative perception on the bounce being removed, but there was a lot of talk when Dean Margetts came on this show on Thursday to have a chat about the centre bounce being removed, and there's been a lot of opinion about it. What do you make of it?
I'm fully for it. Personal opinion, but I think it's great that they've got rid of the bounce. I thought the game flowed really well, the one that I called at Leederville Oval. And not just that, I felt like the decision-making was really good from the umpires on that day. And is that got anything to do with the fact that they're not worried about the bounce, that they can back out and then purely focus on what they're trying to adjudicate? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that you'll see that no one's going to be talking about it much in 6 to 7 weeks' time. It was a traditional thing. It brings more umpires into the game. We need to train more umpires up, and if we can eliminate that as being a requirement for it and focus more on the decision-making, which is the most important part, then I think that's the way to go.
The recruitment and the retention was a couple of the prime reasons that why the centre bounce was being removed, and it also restores a little more faith into the umpiring system and how the umpires officiate the game. Because like you said, decision making and how you make those decisions is going to be so important across the season now with the centre bounce being gone.
Yeah, and I think I mean, the two premiums that they were putting on for so long is fitness, which is incredibly important. You want to be able to get to the stoppage to make decisions and be able to when there's ball in transition to be able to move and get down to the play. And clearly the fitness levels of the umpires is outstanding. The bouncing was a bit of an issue, but combine that with the fact that we have WAFL grounds and there are going to be some dodgy surfaces from time to time. We saw that all throughout last year. We can't control the weather. And I think that, just by eliminating that, it just makes them focus more on that decision making, their ability to find themselves in better positions at stoppages and making the right calls.
Is the centre bounce removal worth it, listeners? Let us know in the comments on wherever you get your podcast or on the BackChat YouTube channel. Let us know what you thought of the centre bounce being removed after round one. Now, some news from the MRP Tyson. Sam Rotham, who was reported on multiple charges in the grand final rematch against Claremont, has escaped suspension. Luckily, he was reported on 3 charges. He was booked twice for striking Jack Lucy and 1 on rough conduct on Jai Bolton, but has accepted a reprimand. That's a huge relief for the Falcons.
Oh, absolutely, because Sam's a really important player for them. He can sometimes find himself in the ruck. He's a key defender, but he's also a leader. He's an older player, very mature guy. I know Sam pretty well, and I think they'll be happy to have him back. And it was obviously there was a bit of spite in a grand final rematch. Why not? That's why it was so exciting. And I think the return leg of that might be very interesting later in the year as well, Paul.
Certainly will over at Revo Fitness Stadium. Expect plenty of feeling in that one mid-season. Jordan Snadden for Subiaco, however, wasn't so lucky. He had been suspended for 1 match for his bump on Perth's Harry Quartermain. That one was a clear one for the MRP, I have to say. A couple of steps too late when Quartermain disposed of the footy, and the MRP, I think, made the correct call.
Yeah, that one was going to be tough to overturn, and they'll miss Jordan next week in the co-10 battle. So a big loss for Subi. He's a player that's another critical player in the WAFL. So we'll see how they go without him. But yeah, probably one that was going to be tough to overturn.
And Subiaco's defensive half has another hole, not just with Jordan Lockyer being out until early in the season after that knee reconstruction that he's been going through and the recovery from that injury in round 6 last year, but I reckon Subiaco still has the experience to cover for that loss.
Yeah, I mean, their back six was their strength for so long, and then we saw probably some weakness there last year for the first time in a long time, but they still have Angus Dewar, so experienced. So I think that overall Subi should be able to cover. But they're in for a big challenge against East Perth this week, which we'll talk about soon.
Now, just some late news that has been hitting the wires throughout the morning before we recorded this podcast. Apparently, Tyson, big trucks represented by Sullivan Logistics are making their way to Leederville Oval. There's been reports that Leederville Oval could be set for a name change and the WAFL could be in for a huge amount of sponsorship dollars.
Yeah, if this is true, this is great work by the WA Footy Commission because it's been a long time coming trying to get a major sponsor since 2021, basically the last 2 years, difficulties through COVID, all that sort of stuff. But also for Leederville Oval, this is a ground that has 2 teams playing at it. So it has the most amount of content for the WAFL throughout the year. And very important that they try and get a naming rights sponsor for the ground. They haven't had one since I think it was called Medibank Stadium a while back. So it's definitely, these things can annoy supporters that it doesn't have the traditional name at times. But remember, any revenue and money coming into the game is a fantastic thing for the sport.
Yeah, for the WAFL, any amount of sponsorship dollars that are coming in is going to be a huge boost long term, and in particular short term, because especially now with the new marketing campaign, the goal to attract new fans into the competition, all those factors combined, there's going to be more ticks in the box for the West Australian Football Commission, and they can be credited for the efforts so far. Okay, let's get into our match previews, Tyson. Round 2 of the WAFL season. We're going to start it off at Pentanet Stadium in Joondalup, West Perth and West Coast. Some would say this is going to be a one-sider. I don't really think this is the case because, especially with West Perth, they looked pretty rusty last week against Claremont in the grand final rematch. If you look at one stat in particular, Tyson, 3rd equal most inside 50s with 51, but they had the lowest conversion rate of all the teams in round 1, every 10 entries for a goal.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a little bit of rust, Paul, but remember, they lost last year's game, round 1, against Claremont as well, and then bounced back and had a tremendous win against Peel Thunder down in Mandurah. I called that game at the time, and I thought they were fantastic. They kicked 7 goals in that first quarter, and they managed to hold on for the victory when Peel came back a little bit more later in the game. So I think they wouldn't be concerned about dropping that first game, even though they would have liked to have won that grand final rematch I think that they well positioned. It's a long season. There's still 17 more games to go in the regular season. So I think no dramas with that. They probably just want to sharpen up and that sort of thing. Remember, they have had a shorter off season than most other clubs other than Claremont. So I don't expect that they'll be looking into that loss too much as being a problem down the track.
What about the West Coast? There were a lot of positives despite their thumping defeat at the hands of South Fremantle. Jackson Nelson, captain of the side, he showed some good form in midfield and a little further up the ground. Harry Creasy, I reckon, showed glimpses of his potential. So a lot of positives to take in for the West Coast Eagles, and I reckon they could be a very competitive unit once again.
Yeah, and that's what they want to be is competitive because Harry Creasy, Joey Deegan, they've got some really good top-up players, the boys do, and Alec Waterman and Jackson Nelson. I mean, that's probably the critical two players that have come into the team over the off-season for the Eagles, that they haven't had a couple of really steady old heads to help the WAFL boys get up and going throughout the year when things are getting a bit tough. So Jacko is the captain. A great appointment, and Alec Waterman, who was playing some outstanding football even at AFL level not that long ago. So I think it'll be closer than what people think. I mean, obviously West Perth will be strongly favoured, but depending on what the team comes out, then it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles line up. And it might be a tight one. I remember back in 2019 they played a ripping final there, it was Brady Gray that actually kicked the game-winning goal for West Coast in a final up at Joondalup in a big crowd, and they weren't too happy about that. But West Coast in their first year as a standalone team in 2019, making the semi-final after that game. So that was, I think, the last time West Coast won up at Joondalup. So it's been a long time, and West Perth have a big advantage there normally, and a big one over us for sure.
Very hard to beat West Perth are Joondalup, but it's going to be a big game. Make no mistake about it. I think West Coast, with the players they've got, they're mostly young players, not a lot of old heads, as you said. And under the great experience of Robert Wiley, they could give West Perth a real fright. But the experience for West Perth could be telling. And like you said, they just want to sharpen up on the way they're moving the ball inside forward 50, and just their discipline and their shots for goal as well. I mean, to concede, what was it, 5-12 in that game, that 14-point loss to Claremont. Doesn't seem like a good start, but like you said, they did lose last year in round one. Next game, what a cracker this one's going to be. Steel Blue Oval, Swan Districts, East Fremantle. They met in the same round last year. The Sharks got up by 9 points. This one's going to be another cracker.
Yeah, this looks like a great game on paper. This Swan Districts versus East Fremantle. Swans coming off that heartbreaking loss last week, but they're so good at home. I mean, they're really, really good. Apparently, they've won the last 9 games at Bassendean Oval. Is that right? That's in our notes here, Paul. That's amazing.
Last 9 games, that's correct.
Yeah. The second longest streak at their home ground at Basso, which it's a great place, isn't it? I love going out to Bassendean. The amazing atmosphere, the 3 grandstands, the can bar on the other side. The people are really fun to talk to, and they just love their team. So it's going to be a great game. And East Fremantle have high hopes for this season. So losing last week to Peel Thunder, tough way to start, going down to Peel round 1 for a team that's probably hoping to maybe make a grand final this year. Dropping that one. But like West Perth, they shouldn't worry about that too much because there's another 17 games. Here's the next opportunity against Swans. And, I think this is going to be a really tight game. It's a hard one to call, this one. But Swans with that midfield, that pace, that's where they can win the game over East Fremantle. The Sharks with their spread, they're hoping to get as many entries as possible and get conversions through their big key forwards. So it's a really tough one to call. It'll be a great game.
Mate, you're absolutely right, Tyson. That midfield, it's going to be a battle of the midfields. And I think Swan Districts has a little bit more up their arsenal, especially when East Fremantle have got still Blaine Boakhurst missing. And we're not going to, throw all the responsibility on Blaine because he's not going to come back until later in the season. But they weren't the same midfield as they were last year throughout that game. They had a few players not in the best form, especially in the last quarter when they let that 21-point advantage at three-quarter time slip. But having said that, they can have players that can shift up the ground and increase the scoreboard pressure. Luke English, he was fantastic. He kicked 3 goals in that game, had 15 or 16 touches. And Cody Walker, he can take a few good pack marks and really provide that additional flare up the ground for East Fremantle.
Yeah, and for East Fremantle, the player to worry about is Aidan Clark. He was sensational last week for Swans. Yeah. His run and carry was brilliant. He gets off the leash and he's very hard to defend. And his delivery inside 50 is pretty good too. But that's the guy I'd worry about for Swans. Even though they've got all those other weapons, they have a pretty good midfield, Swans, and so does East Fremantle. So that'll be where the battle is won and lost.
are also in Swan District's defensive half because they've got a key weapon in Brandon Ursek. His intercept marking can really nullify the Sharks' forward influence in the game.
Yeah, and Brandon had a great game last week as well. Co-captain, reliable player, makes good decisions with the ball. The guy I would like to see a little bit more out of this week, Chris Jones, the other captain, the other co-captain of Swans, had a few opportunities last week, and in the second half, once Swans got back into the game. But he's such a dangerous forward. He's very rangy, hard to defend, long arms. If he can get off the leash and kick 4 or 5, then Swans are a great chance.
Now, from one cracking game to another, Claremont and South Fremantle. This one's going to be on Channel 7 from 2 o'clock. What a game this one's going to be. Both teams have had a few cracking encounters over the last few years, including that amazing grand final at Fremantle Oval. Last time they met here at Revo Fitness Stadium, appalling conditions. The Bulldogs got the job done, but the Tigers very hard to beat at home.
Yeah, they are pretty hard to beat at home. And you know what's amazing, Paul, is this would be their 1,000th win if they win this one. So that their current record, 999 wins, 1,016 losses and 11 draws. That's amazing considering Claremont's success in the second half of last century into this century. I mean, they've been probably one of the standards of the WAFL since the 1980s, and yet they have an actual overall losing record. So their early years in their history were pretty tough, which is amazing. And these two teams haven't played at Claremont Oval or Revo Fitness, as you say, for some time, and it'll be interesting to see how Souths handle the ground. A little bit different to the dimensions of Fremantle Oval, and they've also played it regionally as well recently. So I think it'll be a good game. I think Souths, it was good for them to get a win on the board early, given they're starting from behind with those 2 games, negative 8 points on the ladder. So they'll want to get another win. All of a sudden they're at 0, and that makes them, okay, there's still a chance that they could go and make the top 5, even though they've started 2 games behind. But the Tigers at home, and remember, they'll be up and about after that win last week. They're desperate to overcome last year's grand final loss and another recent grand final loss to South Fremantle in 2020. They'll think that it's their year, and they're not going to want to let a chance slip at home in their first game at home at Revo Fitness this year.
I think a big worry for the Bulldogs, though, is once again Jai Bolton. His performance in round 1 was just sensational. 38 touches, very lean on his feet. We were saying in the episode, myself and Dean Margetts on Thursday, that he's lost a little bit of weight. He's looking a little bit fitter this season, and it's certainly showing with the way he's moving the football, able to maintain his balance and deliver. I mean, it goes to show why he's one of the prime players in the WAFL competition.
Yeah, and maybe a chance to win another Sandover medal. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, it's such a rare thing if he was able to get another one. But yeah, I mean, losing a bit of weight at that age, it can be really difficult for players to drop weight and then change their games. But it's a good observation. It might have been something that might be able to take him to another level for the Tigers, and maybe that's another means to getting back into the grand final, and his distribution from halfback coming into the midfield. I mean, he's a great player. He's been a fantastic player since he's come across from Victoria.
Now, he certainly has, and his resume really proves why he is one of the best. And another thing for Claremont too is just the way they're able to move the ball across the ground and open up play. They're willing to take the risk. South Fremantle, they have to counter that with physical pressure.
They do, and that's going to be probably that's a good point of how the game might actually be. If Claremont can spread the ball, remember, even going back to that grand final, once Claremont was able to take some more risks on the outside, it really opened up the opportunities for them to get back in the game. And they do have some pace and some run off half back, which is some teams just can't defend whatsoever against Claremont. So interesting to see how this one goes. We'll hold our tips to the end, but I think this one, like the South game or the Swans game, is going to be pretty close.
No doubt. I reckon it'll be down to the wire. Now, the 4th match on Saturday, it's at Lane Group Stadium, south of the river. Peel Thunder taking on Perth. Interesting game for both teams. Peel, of course, coming from 21 points down at three-quarter time to snatch the game by 4. And Perth looked very competitive in the first half, but ultimately reined in by the experience of Subiaco. Could this be a sign that either Perth could bounce back and show their competitiveness was not a one-off, or could Peel Thunder, even with the Dockers players that they have in that team, prove that once again they can be a final threat?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see when these teams come out, how loaded Peel is with Fremantle players, and if players are held back for any reason. But I think, given the timings of the game, we're going to find out pretty quickly that Peel will probably have quite a few Fremantle players in there, and they should be strong favourites here in this game against the Demons. Yeah, good effort in the first quarter, wasn't it, by Perth last week against Subi, but couldn't maintain it. And that happened a few times last year. But, as Peter German starts to get more of a hold of the squad and implement his game plan, hopefully that they're able to stay competitive and stop runs from the opposition once 4 or 5 goals get slapped on to try and stem the flow defensively. That'll probably be what he'd like to focus on. Peel Thunder, they are a tough team if you're starting to lose control of the game in the third and fourth quarter. Remember, the fitness of a lot of those Fremantle listed players often gets them over the line, especially at home. So I think Peel will be pretty strong favourites in this one.
When you talk about the likes of Sam Sturt and Will Brodie, who will likely be missing from that Peel game against Perth to go over to Adelaide for the gather round, they'll be playing the Gold Coast over the weekend. It really goes to show how much depth Peel can really have, even if they are missing around 3 or 4 Dockers players, because Brodie and Sturt, they were terrific in that last quarter. Brodie in the coalface getting those clearances, and Sam Sturt, 2 goals in 2 minutes in the final quarter. That represents a lot of what the depth Peel Thunder, how much depth Peel really has at both ends of the ground.
Yeah, Brodie was borderline All-Australian squad kind of level player last year. He was fantastic for Fremantle, and he's found himself in the WAFL side. I mean, that's the depth that Fremantle possess at the midfield, and then they've got those kids, Neil Erasmus and Matt Johnson, Matt managed to push up into the AFL side, but played last year at WAFL level. Whereas you compare that to, say, West Coast, where a lot of the first rounders have had to play straight away due to injuries. So it's all a lot of it's dependent on your squad balance, your squad fitness, the health of the AFL team, and when Fremantle's team is healthy, then Peel's team is healthy, and that means they're a great chance to win games.
What about Perth? I mean, Peter German was willing to take risk in moving their regular forwards up to the midfield. Case in point, Sam Stubbs in the first and second quarters. He showed lightning pace in the centre, getting the clearances for Perth. But the problem was their delivery inside 50 after half-time wasn't as effective. Whenever Perth delivered the ball inside 50, there was always a Subiaco player picking the bones.
Yeah, Stubbs is an interesting one, isn't he? He's kind of like he's an electric, enigmatic kind of forward who potentially has that midfield ability too. I don't want to say Jordan De Goey, but someone like that kind of electrifying forward who has the ability to go in the midfield and make an impact. The issue probably is around stamina and endurance as well, and being able to get in there for long periods of time and continue to try and get clearances, contested possessions, that sort of thing. Delivery inside 50 at times, but he is such an exciting player. He's great for the WAFL, Stubbs. I mean, he's got a huge following on TikTok. People know who he is. He's got a bit of strut about him. I think that's the kind of guy, when we talk about marketing the WAFL, he's a guy that you can really get behind and notice when you go to games.
He's a real down-to-earth bloke as well. I had him on radio pre-season, and just the way he's so relatable to a lot of people in the WAFL, not just young but also old. But where he comes from, his background, his footy background, just remarkable, an amazing story, and just the way he plays as well. Such a spectacular forward. I called a few of his games last year. His marking ability and his goal-kicking prowess inside 50, he's got the wow factor, Sam Stubbs.
Yeah, and
that's
I mean,
pretty
who
much
knows?
It. He's got the wow factor. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Well, if he can get super fit, who knows? He could get on a list. I know he's done some training with AFL teams, but I mean, some of the stuff that he has, you can't teach. That goal sense and that ability to know where the goals are, to pull something out, which other players can't. So, yeah, I want to see how he develops over this season. If he just throws everything into his football, who knows?
It will certainly be interesting come Saturday against Peel Thunder. Now the final game of the round, and what a beauty this one's going to be. The battle of the co-tenants up at Leederville Oval, Subiaco and East Perth. Oh, this one, I reckon, is going to be red hot right down to the wire.
Oh, absolutely, Paul. And I'm calling this one on afl.com.au, streaming, thanks to GMTV. It's going to be a fantastic game. I'm really looking forward to it. Subi versus East Perth. I called this one last year, the game that ended up in a 1-point result for Subiaco with Maxi Walters with the soccer off the ground with 3 or 4 seconds left. It was such an exciting game, and I think this one could be really good too, because East Perth, they started really well last week, ended up winning by just 1 point as well against Swan Districts. Their midfield is where it's at, and you sort of think their midfield now with Mitch Crowden is possibly the best midfield in the WAFL. Scott Jones, the ruck, a big guy, gets a lot of hit-outs throughout the game. Hamish Brayshaw, best and fairest winner at East Perth. Crowden, as I mentioned, coming into that team as an acquisition. Angus Schumacher, fantastic player. So they've got a lot of weapons, and they've got some young players as well. And they've shored up their key defensive stocks, and their forward stocks aren't too bad. So I think East Perth, their goal has got to be finals this year with the improvements that they've made to their team. And here's a great test. They've knocked off Swans. Now they've got Subiaco, who's kind of owned them in the last few years. In fact, they've won their last 4 games and 16 out of 17, Paul. That's amazing.
What a streak.
It goes all the way back to 2015. Only one win, and that was in the COVID year of 2020. That was by 9 points. So this is a huge test for Ross McQueen and East Perth up against Subi. Bo Wardman, so experienced, and so many experienced players with Subi. So I love this game. I reckon it's probably going to be the game of the round.
I would think so, especially with so many weapons at both sides. You talk about Subiaco, their midfield kitchen. Walters even shifted up the ground during Saturday night's win over Perth under lights, and he was huge in the coalface and even a little further up the ground, like you said. And also up forward, I reckon this is where Subiaco could win the game. Ben Sokol. When he gets into form, he is hard to stop, no matter what defender you put on him.
And wasn't he brilliant again last week? I mean, Sokol, I just think he's a fantastic player, a great WAFL player. He's kicked so many goals. He's so reliable. And he's not a big guy either. I mean, to be a leading forward at his size, and he's the way he converts goals from different angles inside 50, he's just a gem. So they've got to stop him. The problem for East Perth has been kind of fade-outs to a degree, last year in particular, and then in round 1, having a dominant lead in the game, and they're just allowing the opposition to get back into the game and not really having a way to stop that or combat that. So can East Perth get on top early? I think they can, but whether or not they can maintain throughout the game will be the key question for them. And then Subiaco, if they get behind, can they respond? Do they have the ability to get back into it as well? So I'm fascinated by how this one's going to play out. But I think it's going to be a really good game. The weather looks okay on the weekend, even though we've got a lot of rain here on Thursday and Friday coming up. I reckon that a nice clean surface at Leaderville, we should see a great game.
I reckon we should. And with that in mind, let's go to the tips for round 2. We'll start things off with West Perth and West Coast. Hopefully, fingers crossed, personally, I go more than 1 from 5 this round. But anyway, West Perth and the Eagles. Who wins over there in Joondalup?
Okay, well, I've got my West Coast hat on here, so Falcons fans probably not going to like this, but I'm going to predict an upset here, Paul. This might not be a very common prediction, but I think it could be a close one, 5-point win to the Eagles.
There's going to be some many shocked Falcons fans after that, but I'll say West Perth, but I reckon it's going to be only 4 goals. Some would say it's going to be another 50, 60-point thrashing. I don't think that's really the case. I mean, especially with West Coast, fielding so many positive, despite the margin that they got beaten by against South Fremantle, but I reckon West Perth, they'll sharpen themselves up quite nicely after their round 1 loss. So West Perth for me by about 4 goals. And then the first of the real hard to pick games this round, Swan Districts and East Fremantle.
Yeah, that is a tough one. And Swans at home are really, really strong. East Fremantle bring in a really good team though, and I think they should bounce back. I think even though they lost that game, they really did dominate large periods of it against Peel Thunder. My prediction is going to be East Fremantle by 2 goals, 12 points.
East Fremantle by 12. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Swan Districts, hard to beat at home. Aidan Clark on fire. And Jesse Turner, playing in tandem, Clark and Turner in the midfield, can be deadly. That's what will win them the game. Claremont and South Fremantle from Revo Fitness Stadium, another cracking game.
Yeah, this is a tough one to pick, but I think the Tigers, they're up and about. They're at home. South Fremantle haven't played a lot there at Revo recently, and I think that the Tigers are going to win by 13 points.
Tigers for me as well. It's going to be a good game. Make no mistake about that. Peel Thunder and Perth from Lane Group Stadium in Mandurah.
Yeah, Peel, this is probably the more dominant game of the weekend, or one-sided game of the weekend, I think. Peel Thunder again at home against Perth. I think Peel probably win this by 4 goals.
Yeah, Peel for me as well, round the same margin, but expect Perth to be very competitive. They showed glimpses of that on Saturday night in round 1. And finally, this is going to be a good one. You'll be at this one, like you said. Battle of the Co-Tenants at Leaderville Oval, Subiaco and East Perth.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to pick against Subiaco. Even though when you think they're going to be on the downward slide, they still have so many great players and such an even list. I have a feeling, though, East Perth, that the energy after they had that victory the other day, The supporters are up and about. They're trying to make the finals for the first time in 5 years. New coach. I reckon they're going to win this. It's going to be really tight, maybe just 3 points, East Perth.
3 points to East Perth, but I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Subiaco by at least a goal. This one's going down to the wire over at Leederville Oval. The experience in Subiaco's midfield and their forward line is going to be the difference. Even with, you mentioned East Perth's X factors here, Brayshaw, Schumacher, Crowden, and also Scotty Jones in the ruck. They're going to be big for East Perth, but the Lions' experience all over the ground is going to be too strong. Can't wait for round 2, Tice, and we thank you for joining us on Around the Waffle. Good luck with the call at Leederville Oval. That one's going to be a beauty.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a pleasure. Love the show. You're doing a great job, and hopefully get on again sometime.
Certainly will, mate. And to our listeners and our viewers, we thank you very much for your company, listening on wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube. Don't forget, Tuesday, our round 2 review, our regular co-host, Taylor Cowper, is going to be making his debut for season 2023. We can't wait to have him on for the first time in a big, big season of Waffle Football. Make sure you like us on our Facebook page, our Instagram, and on Twitter, so you can find out where our shows are available to, and you can check out some of our reels and our highlights as well for every episode. We look forward to your listenership on Tuesday when we review round 2.